Months ago is the 70 most difficult questions in Judaism, but we're doing a mini-series. The mini-series has to do with astrology. Astrology according to Judaism, of course. And in astrology we are taking apart all the signs and showing the strengths and the weaknesses so that we can better understand the human soul. After all, one of the questions that we dealt with was the nefesh, the ruach, the neshama, kochot nefesh, the various parts of the soul, the spirit. And we spoke about free will versus predestination. These are very important topics in Judaism because one has to have a good understanding of where he truly has free will and where he does not. And Jewish astrology basically defines it very, very clearly that there's two parts to astrology. One that deals with the goral, the fate, the destiny, which we rarely have any influence over, except through teshuvah, repentance, tefillah, prayer, and tzedakah, and charity, where because of our special relationship with the Almighty, we can even change our destiny. That has happened. People have been blessed. People who have not had children for many years have had them after many years as a result of some blessing. Because we very much believe in the hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the divine providence, which is also very fundamental to our faith, that not only did God create the world, He continues to supervise and allows for certain changes in one's destiny. But in Judaism, there's a lot more emphasis on the astrology that has to do with the ofi and the issue with one's character and personality, because that is not necessarily changeable, but that is controllable. That is where we really have the bechirah chofshi, the free will. Even though, as I mentioned earlier, one cannot change himself completely from what he is, but one can exercise self-control. And that is what is important for us to know all about the mazalot, because that will help us hopefully do battle with the yetzirah, with the evil inclinations, and control our weaknesses and maximize our potential. Everyone has some strengths and weaknesses, and the more we are familiar with them, the better we will be prepared to deal with them. We will also be helped in recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of our friends, of our spouse, and that will give us a better understanding of why they do certain things, and that will hopefully help avoid misunderstandings. So that is why I'm covering this topic this time. And it's not for curiosity reasons. People are sometimes surprised, astrology, why are you teaching astrology? We're not doing it from curiosity, and not because it's fascinating, but because it's really important. And many of you will not really hear many of these words or this topic from any other religious organization or individual, because simply they're not very familiar with this topic. It is part of Jewish mysticism, and as you know, Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, is not something that is taught everywhere. It is a more complex wisdom. Nevertheless, it's wisdom, it's knowledge, and if we can learn it, and if we're mature enough to understand it, then of course we can definitely gain a lot from it. I added, before we go through the introduction of today's sign, I wanted to add another very important point, that the rabbis tell us that it would be beautiful for all of us to develop the midah called ladun et kol adam lechav zechut. Ladun et kol adam lechav zechut means to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, to judge everybody favorably. That is a beautiful thing to do. Why did they say so? Not only so we could become better individuals ourselves, not only that we should refine our character and think positively, not negatively, but in actuality, if we do so, we will realize that most of the time, had we judged not favorably, we would have been wrong. The reason why people judge negatively is not necessarily because they like to criticize, it's because they tend to see the fault instead of seeing the positive that everyone has. And everyone has something beautiful about them, but people tend to see the negative, the faults, and that is what leads them to criticize, especially if they don't have the patience or their willingness to deal with the problem. Rabbis tell us, be careful to judge everybody favorably, give them the benefit of the doubt. Tadun otam lechav zechut, and there are many good consequences as a result of that. If you judge others favorably, you will be judged favorably from above. So there's a lot of good things that will happen if we judge people favorably. And it definitely helps, I believe, that if we have an understanding of how people function through their mazal, we will have a better understanding that there is no evil on their part, that they don't do something out of spite. That's the way they are. That's their personality. And we have to live with it if we want to have anything to do with them. Another famous saying is "En chacham kebala nisayon" in Hebrew. The wisest person is one who learns from experience. And a lot of what you will see here, tonight we're going to be discussing Taurus, Mazal Shor, the second sign of the zodiac. You may be surprised, where is all this knowledge known from? Where is this all documented and recorded? Because only the basics you will find in the Kabbalah, only the very basics for every sign. And here there's so much elaboration, a lot of work went into putting together in describing the child, the woman, the man, the whole Mazal in itself. Where do we know this from? From experience. You know, when with dealing with people of every sign, one sees certain common characteristics that are across the board, always the same. Even though I've emphasized, and I will say it again, it's important to remember that everyone is unique, and not everyone of the same sign is exactly the same, simply because we also have the hour to deal with, and the hour makes a big difference besides the month, and we have the genes, we have the upbringing, right, the education that one has had, and all of these are factors that contribute to molding the personality. And on top of all of that, we have the beautiful, unique neshama, which is the captain of the ship that makes all the decisions. So you can have two people with very similar character and personality reacting differently. One is educated and knows better, and one is not educated, is primitive and reacts differently. So it helps to have the experience so we do not repeat the mistakes of others. Also, another point, if Hashem has made all of us so different, is because there's a need for every one of us. We spoke about the various elements, fire, earth, water, and air. Even though we all have a little bit of everything, some of us have one more dominant element, and that is what makes us unique. Nevertheless, we need all of them. Therefore, there's no such a thing as one is a good mazal and one is a bad mazal. Everyone is important. As the pasuk in Mishleh says, "Ashir berash nifgashu, oseh kulam Hashem." A rich man and a poor man meet on the same street, and guess what? Hashem has made both of them. It's not that he made himself, that he's a batlan, in other words, he can't work, he doesn't know how to work, and that's why he's poor, and this man is rich because he's so smart. It has nothing to do with being smart or not being smart. Oseh kulam Hashem. Everything is dependent on one's mazal. Hashem brings the two together. Why he brings them together? Because the poor man needs the rich, and the rich man needs the poor. If Hashem has given one more money than someone else, not only is he testing him, but he actually expects him to use his money wisely, to share it with others. It's not necessarily that he deserves more than the poor man. So in the same way that the rich and poor meet and are dependent in each other in a sense, the same way all the elements and all the mazalot are dependent on each other. Perhaps some of you have thought of a question that I was asked in the past. Well, if this is so accurate, if this is so interesting, and this is something that we can really use in life, can we use this when we are dating? After all, I did point out that affinity, compatibility does depend on the elements and on the signs. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. It always works. If you know the dominant element, I'm willing to sign my name. Either you will get along with him or her, or you will not. Maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit less or more, but there's definitely going to be either some compatibility or lack of it depending on the elements. Well, good. Then this should be something that we could use, a valuable tool to decide if somebody is compatible with us for marriage purposes or if you're a partnership. You want to know if you can trust your partner. Yeah, it could be a valuable tool. But our tradition does not really have mazalot as a tool to be used unless you turn to Kabbalah. If you turn to the Kabbalah, then obviously people look at names. If the names match up, people look at mazalot too. But if you don't turn to the Kabbalah, tamim tiyem Hashem elokecha, you really have to be completely sincere with Hashem, meaning that He's the one that, after all, mezavek zivugim, puts people together. And He does a good job. Sometimes we don't appreciate it. We ruin it for Him. We're overly picky. We just delay it. Or we don't like what we got. Right? That's where a lot of people end up getting divorced, even though they really were for each other. So nonetheless, it is a tool that one can use, but one should not rely on this entirely to make his decision. One really should go by the criteria most people use. Is she or he a God-fearing person? Do we share the same values? Is there a physical attraction? Do we have common goals? Is she or he healthy? These are the most common things that people should look at, not if she or he has money, because that's really not that important. Even if they do right now, who's to say they'll have it tomorrow? So there are more important things that we should look out for. But if you are familiar with this, it could definitely help you refine your decision if you're having any doubts or hesitations as to what kind of a person you can expect in the house. You can definitely use it, but not to base your decision entirely on that. Another quick point about cusps. Those of you who are familiar with astrology may have come across the term cusp. The cusp means when somebody is in between two mazalot. January 20, for example, is on the cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. It means that sometime on January 20, depending on which part of the world you were born, the sun was already entering Aquarius, leaving Capricorn, entering Aquarius. And you really need a computer to figure out exactly, if you want to know what sign you are, because you're on the cusp, you're on that day that mazal changes. So some astrologers claim that if you're on the cusp, you share some of the attributes or qualities of the previous mazal. Nobody knows for sure if that's true, because research has shown that those that show characteristics of the previous mazal, it's not because they're on the cusp, but because it's because of the hour or because of other factors in their chart that tend to be of the same element as the previous mazal. Anyway, this might be a little bit technical for some of you, but I wanted to share it with those who are more familiar with astrology, that Judaism does not talk about cusps so much, but it does give importance to other factors in the chart that will tend to give more of one element than the other. The difference between the month and the hour, the month really has a lot to do with the individuality of a person, what is driving the person, how he knows himself, whereas the hour has a lot to do with the chitzoniyut, with the external part, which we call in English personality, as other people see him. A lot of people who have a very opposite element on the hour will come across as very much of one element, where they are in fact belonging to another element based on their sun sign. And the more one is of one element, the more obvious it is to you what he is, by just looking at his face and you're looking at his composure. So sometimes it's difficult to figure out what somebody is, and sometimes it's easier. And last but not least, let's not forget that even though the mazal does have some influence over one's character and personality, we do have certain inclinations that we receive by the moment of birth. Let us not forget, very importantly, that we have bechira chofshi, we have free will, and that free will is very, very important that we use properly in making the right decisions. And without the Torah, one cannot make the proper decisions. By default, like a computer, by default, one will tend to go to what is programmed in the computer. And what's programmed in the human body has certain instincts, certain traits, and certain characteristics. And if one does not guide them properly, by default, you will just be following those. And those may not always be positive. And that is the idea of presenting this information, as to see the positive and the negative of each mazal and how to best manage them. So before we go to Mazal Shor, which is the mazal of today, I want to point out what the rabbis tell us in Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had several students, and he asked them to each one give his opinion as to what midah, what characteristics should be developed the most. And the bottom line was a good heart. As I pointed out in the top here, a good heart is the key to all the good traits. If one really works on developing a good heart, he will have an easier time with all the other midot. And I had a chart last week, and I'll try to bring it up again, a chart of many midot, characteristics that some of us have, some of us are lacking, that we need to work on. If one works on the lev tov, on having a good heart, it will make it easier for him to be charitable, generous, patient. All of these good things that one may think they're independent of each other. They're really related or are greatly enhanced by one having a good heart. The best teacher is experience, as I pointed out before. Rabbis tell us who is smart, he who foresees the consequences of his actions. So by seeing or by hearing about the mistakes of others or about their weaknesses and what has happened to them as a result of those weaknesses, we can know how to deal with them if we have those weaknesses or if we know somebody that has those weaknesses. So that's why experience is very helpful. The real self is what you make of yourself. What does that have to do with anything? Even though we are what we are based on how we were born and what we received in our upbringing, but the real self will be determined once we are eulogized. And what happens when we are eulogized? Hopefully somebody will be saying the truth and not flattering and not making up stories, and they will be basically saying what this man or woman has made of themselves, despite their struggles, despite their hardships. That is your real self, what you have made of yourself. So don't worry about something that you may have that is not, you may see. If you're a Taurus here, you may like certain things, you may not like certain things, but the real self is what you make of yourself. And then regardless of one's astrological sign, everyone can be a mensch. Now I'll talk a little bit more about this point after we talk about Taurus. For those of you who do not know Yiddish, a mensch means a decent human being. He's a mensch, as we say in Hebrew, ben Adam. In other words, regardless of what you have and what you were given by birth, you can make yourself a mensch. You can become a decent human being, and that is again through one's free will. So now we're going to go to Mazal Shor. This is just a brief description for those of you who are born between April 20 and May 20. What many of you will have in common is that this Mazal, called Taurus in English, is patient and reliable, warm-hearted and loving, persistent and determined, placid and security-loving. Now you may tell me, I know a Taurus that is not exactly very patient. Yes, it's possible, because remember, there are many little things that fine-tune the chart. But for the most part, they will be more patient than last Mazal. We spoke about, remember, Aries? You will notice a lot of differences between every Mazal. Patience is not one of the virtues of Aries. He's always in a hurry. He wants to get things done. He's always on to new projects. Patience is not his virtue, but it is a virtue of a Taurus. Taurus can be very patient. On the dark side, on the negative, they can be jealous and possessive, resentful and inflexible. The reason why they can be inflexible is because they have a lot of stubbornness, which we'll talk about later. Self-indulgent and greedy. I don't know if I would agree with this description that they're greedy, but they can be self-indulgent because they are materialistic. They like stability, being attracted, things that are natural, time to ponder, comfort and pleasure. And they dislike disruption, being pushed too hard, anything that is synthetic or man-made things, being rushed, being endorsed. This is just a brief description of this sign. Taurus is an earth sign. The other earth signs are Capricorn and Virgo, which means that all three earth signs will have certain things in common. For example, stubbornness. Stubbornness is known as a trait of those who are the earth element, like the earth, solid as a rock, immovable. Stubbornness, rigid. But you have a different kind of stubbornness in Capricorn, in Taurus, and in Virgo. Even though they're all the same, they're somewhat different. Of all three, the most stubborn is Taurus. As I will point out, of all the three, Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo, the words, as we know, it's stubborn, is really Taurus. Then what is Capricorn? Capricorn doesn't like to be called stubborn. He likes to be called persistent. Well, is that stubbornness? Yes and no. It depends how it's used. Once they make up their mind, they won't change it easily. That is true with Capricorn and Taurus, and not so much with Virgo, because they tend to be a little bit more flexible. So there are some differences between them, but they share a lot in common. So now I'm going to begin with the description of Taurus. Then we're going to go over to the man and the woman and the children and the boss. If you have a boss who's a Taurus, it helps to know what he's like. basically, the Taurus, they're very strong and quiet. They're silent. Their attitude is not very loud and noisy. You won't hear them talk too much. They speak sparingly. They speak, if necessary. They're not the very talkative people that you may meet. If you find a Taurus that is very talkative, it's possible that his rising sign, the hour, is a Gemini. And Gemini is next week. Geminis can be very talkative. There's some Geminis who are quiet. But again, there are some that are more into communication. Taurus is not into communication as much as other signs. They're solid and steady. Nothing easily disturbs their tranquility. You can shout at him, but if his mind is set, he won't budge an inch. This is typical Taurus. They won't budge an inch. Now, what about those Tauruses that will budge a little bit? Well, either because they're smart, right? Or because they're working on themselves, or they realize that it's in their best interest. But Saddam Hussein didn't budge even though he knew it was in his best interest. And he's a Taurus. I'm sorry if I offended any Taurus with mentioning Saddam Hussein, but we have to give good examples. Quite often, he prefers to be left alone. He's perfectly fine if he's by himself. There are some signs who don't like to be by themselves. They're more social. Taurus doesn't mind being by themselves. Don't disturb him, and they will remain very happy. They will be contented. If you press him, he will become obstinate. If you shove too hard, you prepare yourself for a big rage. What's interesting about Taurus, remember when we spoke about Aries, that they're quick to anger and quick to calm down? And we said, oh, that's great, at least he calms down. With Taurus, it's just the opposite. Many years can go by with perfect poise and control. Doesn't get angry. Then all of a sudden, unexpectedly, a pushy person, or something similar to that, will get in his way, and they will charge. His temper is seldom impulsive, but if he gets mad, stay out of the way. If they get mad, they're dangerous like a bull. They can be very, very dangerous if they get mad. But how often do they get mad? Once every couple years. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago that this was better than the one that gets angry often, even though he gets calmed down right away. Who wants to hear somebody getting angry every 10 minutes? So what if he calms down? It becomes difficult to live with that kind of a person who's always getting angry, even though he's calming down. The Taurus, okay, I have a couple years to the next time around he gets upset. And he won't be upset for just any reason. It has to be something very, very serious. But if they get upset, they're very hard to control. Unless, of course, the person who marries them knows how to control a Taurus. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. They prefer to stay at home rather than go to the trouble of visiting others. And by the way, this description here is for men and women, but there are some differences between men and women. So if you're a woman Taurus, you may find some things are a little bit too harsh because they're more masculine. And again, some things might be more for women, but in general, a lot of this applies to both. They're not the social type, so they really prefer to stay at home than to go visiting others. A Taurus husband may refuse to accompany his wife to a friend's house if he is uncomfortable there. If he's uncomfortable, he's not going to go. And a Taurus woman who does not approve of her husband's friends will not talk to them. Taurus is known to just ignore. If they don't like somebody, they'll just ignore them. And it sometimes comes across as very not polite, but that's the way they are. They're not fake. They are what they are. They're not ashamed of it. And if they don't like you, they'll show you their displeasure or their disapproval by just not talking. They just won't talk. And hopefully, some will get the message. The problem is that Leos and Aries don't get the message. They always try and try and try. There are certain signs that don't get the message. But some will get the message. They don't like change. Change upsets them. And so does noisy surroundings. They want quiet. They like getting away from all the clutter of the city and spending time in parks or strolling or just plain enjoying nature. They're very much into nature. You will find a lot of Taurus they're gardeners. They like to garden. They like to do their landscape. They like the trees, the farms. A lot of farmers, a lot of people who are into farming and agriculture are Taurus. They just like nature, the earth. the quiet, the peace, and the tranquility. They have a passive nature and seldom worry or chew their nails. Now, the reason why I wrote this description of chew their nails, because we'll talk about some signs that have this problem. They get very anxious and they begin to chew their nails. They're nervous. Taurus is not the nervous type. They're more passive. And some of them are so stoic that they can easily take things in stride. Not everybody has that kind of a courage to just say, it's okay. I'm going to deal with it. It's not the end of the world. So what if you saw a cockroach? Big deal. That's the reaction of a Taurus. They can easily deal with the situation in a very stoic way. But if things don't go their way, they will brood over and become very gloomy. Because remember, Earth signs, including Capricorn and Taurus, have an inclination to become depressed, easily depressed. Because they're more serious in nature, if things don't go right, they can become depressed. Now, Taurus does not get as depressed as Capricorn. Capricorn is so demanding of himself, as Hashem when we get to it, and he's so ambitious, and he works so hard to get to where he wants to, that if things don't go well, he really becomes depressed, much more than Taurus. Taurus is a lot more easygoing. He's quieter, he's slower. He says, mañana is another day, so if we can't do it today, right? So therefore, he won't get so depressed, but he can become very gloomy if things are not going his way. Patience is one of their virtues, as I pointed out, and they can carry emotional and physical burdens in silence without complaining. B'ezrat Hashem will be talking about a characteristic that in Yiddish we call kvetchers. There are some people who are a kvetch. You know what a kvetch is in English? They are a nag. Naggy. Very dependent, overly dependent on someone else. Not everybody knows how to deal with them. And I won't tell you who they are today. But there are people like that. What can we do? Nagging, they need somebody who's very good to them, who's patient to them, who will calm them down, who will assuage their fears. But anyway, Baruch Hashem, Taurus doesn't have that problem. On the contrary, they're able to take pain and be quiet about it and not share it with anybody else. They won't complain. If you tell a Taurus that he's stubborn, he will tell you that he's just being patient and firm. He doesn't call it stubbornness. He says, that's what I need to do to get what I want. But the truth of the matter is that they are obstinate and they are really glued to their opinions. They have an opinion, they don't change their opinion so often. The problem is that many of them, especially the children, when they're young, they're so stubborn that they won't listen to what the doctor tells them to do. Aquarius also has the problem. Aquarius is what we call in Yiddish an Iber Chochom. You know what an Iber Chochom is? Aquarius thinks he's smarter than the doctor. He knows more. The doctor doesn't know what he's talking about because they are somewhat rebellious. Aquarius is not always conventional, likes to do things different. But the problem with the Taurus is he's not trying to be different. He won't listen. He won't obey. He's not going to tell me what to do. So sometimes that could be a problem with those who are very stubborn. Not every Taurus is that stubborn that he's not going to listen to what his doctor tells him, especially if it's in best interest. But they can be a problem. Now we're going to come to the good that they all have. They are extremely devoted, and they make perhaps one of the most loyal friends. If you have a Taurus as a friend, then you better safeguard that friendship. It's worth its weight in gold. They can make the most loyal friends. And their pockets are wide open to real friends in real trouble. To them, a friend is a friend. Not just a colleague or an acquaintance. They're a real friend. They may have very few friends, but those few are real. Whereas a Leo and Aries will say, oh, I have hundreds of friends. And none of those hundreds of friends are real friends. They're rarely cruel and vindictive. Did I pronounce that right?
Vindictive.
Vindictive? Who decided if it's vindictive or vindictive? Anyway, English is not a phonetic language, so it's hard to figure it out. But anyway, cruelty, and we will see which signs are cruel. There are some signs that have to deal with cruelty, and you have to know that, But then usually they are not. They have a capacity for lasting love. In other words, if they love you, they care about you, ad me'ad ve'esrim, it will be till 120. You know how some people who are married to each other cannot part? If a Taurus marries the right person, that's the feeling that they will have. They can't live without each other. When one passes away from this world, the next one goes after 7 days. It happens because their neshamot are so tied that the kids sat Shiva for one, they have to sit Shiva for the other a week later. This happens. That's right. That's the one I thought about. Yeah. Anyway, they're very, very loving, and their humor is warm and playful. Taurus will prefer few compatible friends to a large crowd. They just don't like large crowds. They're uncomfortable. They may not tell it to you, but they're not as comfortable as being by themselves. Taurus is very tolerant of people's faults, but will not be easily forget a wrong, and may not forgive someone who he trusted that reneged. Now this is the exact opposite of Aries. Remember Aries? He got upset, he yelled at you, he criticized, but 10 minutes later he's your friend again. They forget to forgive, and you're saying, wow, what's this? Now if you're a Taurus, you won't accept that. You won't accept being yelled at or criticized at. Because you're just the opposite. You're tolerant of people's faults, but oy vavoy, they renege. In other words, if there was a true friendship here and they did something like stab a knife behind your back, forget the relationship, it's over with. Forever, no forgiving, no forgetting. Is that good or bad? Well, it depends. It's not so good because you have to forgive. As far as forget, maybe not. Why? Why not? Why shouldn't you forget? Why should you forget? Because if the man is not trustworthy, then why lend him money again? Right, if we're talking about giving money right now. Right, Isaac?
100%.
How many times can you become a friar? How many times can you... a sucker, as we say in English. Right? Once you learn your lesson, you don't do it again.
I want you to give me all this back home.
Yeah. Anyway, but so oy vavoy, if somebody did them a wrong, they will not forget that. But they are forgiving and tolerant of people's faults. You will take a long time getting over the scars of a divorce. You know why? The reason I put that in is because Taurus usually does not divorce. They're into it for a lifetime. They're solid. They're firm. They're stable. They want to love the person who they marry. So they're not even thinking in the back of their minds that this will end up in a divorce. But it has happened to many people. And because it has happened then, it breaks their heart so much that they can't recover. They don't marry a second time so easily because they become distrusting. This is what the world is coming to, that everybody's so selfish and they can't take it because they're not as selfish. They're willing to give of themselves, and if it ever happens to them, it's very hard for them to recuperate. They're slow in making decisions, so don't push them. Let them take their time. That's the way they are. They got to think things through. They got to weigh the pros and cons. They're deliberate, they're cautious. I wrote over here that they're not the gamblers or risk takers. You won't find them in Vegas unless they're at the machines throwing in quarters, trying out their luck. But they won't be gambling away thousands of dollars. They're not risk takers. No junk bonds. Mutual funds, maybe. Only something that has a good track record, something that is somewhat safe. They're not the gamblers or the risk takers. You won't find them. You know how there are some risky sports like mountain climbing and jumping off a cliff with a parachute? It's not going to be a Taurus. It probably is an Aries or a Scorpio or some signs that are willing to take risks and adventure, but not a Taurus or a Capricorn. No way in the world. Unless he has a backup parachute, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, he will plan for tomorrow carefully. They are more into planning. Some signs don't plan. They live for the day. Tomorrow, like Aries, they don't think about 10 years from now what's going to be. Savings accounts? I don't think Aries have savings accounts. They just live for the day. A Taurus will have a savings account. I can 100% guarantee that. As long as he's making some money that he can put aside, he's going to have a savings account. And usually he's going to invest it in real estate because he wants it to be secured as much as possible. He's not going to dive into a swimming pool and later discover that someone forgot to fill it with water. Right? He's going to look. He's going to check it out. He's not going to make the mistake. But there are some that are going to just jump. Now we're going to go to Parnassah and money. Taurus loves money. He likes to accumulate wealth for two reasons. The most important reason is because they really want to be secure. Wealth, money gives them security. They're secure. It gives them a sense of security. Plus, they enjoy it for what it brings. And they are materialistic. They like the good things in life. They enjoy luxury, but they hate waste and extravagance. That they don't like. Even though they like to have a beautiful home, nice things, but no waste and extravagance. And they also have a hard time getting rid of all the accumulated stuff. I didn't write junk. I decided to write the word stuff, because junk doesn't sound good. Because we don't accumulate junk. Who wants to have junk? So we have stuff in the attic. Right? What is that? The garage. We've accumulated, and Taurus can't get rid of. He holds on to it forever. It reminds him of when he was in Nigeria 45 years ago, right? When he was on some trip.
So they like nostalgic. They like to accumulate.
They like to accumulate things, and they have a hard time getting rid of it, throwing it away. I can't blame them. It does have some good memories. They love good food and drink. Now this leads to problems. Because of the food and drink, if you don't watch yourself, the drinking problem can lead to problems with kidneys. The food problem can lead to problems with obesity.
And diabetes.
And diabetes too, blood pressure, etc., etc. And I'm not going to say that every fat person you see in the street is a Taurus. Right? There are fat people in every mazal. In every mazal, because people are not careful. But Taurus has a big advantage. Taurus likes to exercise. Taurus, they like outdoor, they like exercise. They make excellent athletes. For some reason, that's something that they like. There are other signs that are also excellent athletes, but Taurus somehow likes the sports, and if he does the exercise, he will keep in shape, and he won't fall back, he won't be lazy, because if a Taurus does not exercise and slows down and becomes lazy, that's when you start to gain weight. So they can usually stay healthy if they don't become lazy and don't overeat. They have a love for art and music, so do other signs, but Tauruses are known very much into music. A lot of them have a beautiful voice. A lot of them make hazanim. You could become a hazan. Yeah, you have to work on it and develop it. And they like, I wrote gardening and real estate and many of the professions that are earthy in nature. What's earthy in nature? Accounting. Accounting is also, or banking, belongs to Taurus. It has to do with money. It has to do with clear numbers. It's not complex arithmetic. It's something tangible. So you will see a lot of them in banking, real estate, and so forth. Now, what's interesting is the next paragraph is that even though they're good with money, they don't make good salesmen. Now, this may come as a big surprise to many people. Why doesn't a Taurus make a good salesman? It doesn't mean that you will not find a Taurus as a salesman. I mean, it's possible. But the reason why they're not good for selling is because they're very honest, practical. They're not very communicative, so they're not going to lie to you that this is good. They actually may discourage you from buying this. Why don't you buy something else? This one is second hand. I don't think somebody wants to hire that kind of a salesman, right? And they are much more honest than some of the other signs. They're more practical, and they won't mislead you. And since they're not very communicative, they're not as sharp as a Gemini, and they're not as convincing. They're just sweet and nice and patient, and they may be very knowledgeable about the product, but they're not going to make good salesmen. As parents, they may be overprotective. That's some Tauruses have this problem that they're so overprotective that they actually limit their kids from being what they can really become. And that's not good. Not all Tauruses, but some can be very overprotected and will put a barbed wire fence around their children. And that's no good. But they will give of their time and they will be very devoted to them. For the most part, they are patient and affectionate with their children, but will definitely set high standards and be firm on discipline. Discipline is another area that certain mazalot are very strong at in the home, and some mazalot are very easygoing. Do what you want. The house is a mess. There's no order. You go into a person's house and you see things strewn all over the floor. you know this is not a house of a Virgo. You know this is, when you go into a house, you can tell right away, if you know about the Mazalot, what the signs are. Because certain signs will not tolerate sloppiness, will not tolerate things thrown all over, a diaper here, dirt here, and dishes in the sink. Oy boy, some they can't take it. Okay, quick review of the Taurus men and women. The reason I put together a list of man and woman separately is because for those of you who are still single, you want to have an idea what you're getting into. And even for those of you who are married, this is a brief description of the main highlights of the man that you're about to date or get married to, or the woman. For the most part, Tauruses, compared to others, they're more quiet, practical, and down to earth. That's what you should be expecting. They may take longer to decide if to marry you. They may need a lot of dates until they can figure out if this is right or not. They are tender, gentle, and a protective husband. They're protective of you. They won't allow you to just be attacked by anybody. They're protective. They tend to remember birthdays, anniversaries, and they buy gifts. If you're looking for somebody like that, the Taurus most likely will not forget your birthday. Most likely, I said, because some people are forgetful, but they care about these things. However, remember that he's not an Aries or Leo, so he will not sweep you off your feet like a Leo or make promises like an Aries. Some signs make promises and they don't deliver on their promises. He won't do it. Unless he knows he can do something, he won't promise, he won't say anything, and he will not be as demonstrative like a Leo. His word is a word, and his solid as a rock. But be careful not to interrupt him when he's giving a talk to his friends. Some of them can get very upset at that. It shows that you don't respect him. And don't call him names like you are naive. You don't know what you're talking about. A Taurus can easily get offended when those that he cares for, who he thought as a friend or a spouse, talks back and says, you are naive? Who would use that kind of a word to someone that he really cares for? You should really use the word like, are you sure? Perhaps we should look it over. Maybe there's a mistake here, but not to be directly offensive that you are naive. Even though naive doesn't sound that bad, it is bad for a Taurus. You're calling me naive? So they take it very personally. It should not come from somebody who's close to them, like a wife. Has a hard time apologizing, and he expects an apology from others. There was a story with a Taurus child who misbehaved in school, and the mother spent a couple hours in school trying to get him to apologize to the teacher and the principal, and he didn't budge. By the end of the day, he still didn't budge. He never apologized. They have a hard time, again, because of their stubbornness, apologizing. What's the big deal? Just say, I'm sorry. No. But they may expect an apology from others. Now, they will not put up with a loud woman. So if you're loud, I don't think that he will like that.
Who will?
What? Next week we'll talk about that. He will not put up with a loud woman. Or, I like this one who cracks a whip like an animal trainer. Yeah, women who are very, much want to take control, they're not into that. Some people don't care, don't mind. Oh, great, she's very good, she's strong. No, they want to be the one who's in charge. So they will not succeed with one who's loud or one who takes control. They respect a woman who has common sense and lets him wear the pants. They cannot be rushed or pushed. You cannot push them. They need to take their time. They will not tolerate interference from their mother-in-law. Who would, right? Now, some people don't mind. Actually, you know what? There are some signs that actually are very friendly to their mother-in-law. They're their favorite son-in-law. We'll talk about that another time. Which signs are very easygoing, they don't mind. Now, as long as the mother-in-law is normal, of course, there are some that are very demanding. I'm not talking about those situations, but the Taurus is very much, this is my home, I'm the boss here, and I don't want anybody telling me, you married me or you want your mother, right? You can't have it both ways. So they have, even though they're tolerant, they will not have too much tolerance for their mother-in-law. It's just too much interference. Now, you want to know a deeper explanation for this? If you look at it deeper, why doesn't this Taurus have tolerance for his mother-in-law. He has tolerance for everybody else. Because they expect devotion. They're very much into devotion. They're devoted, and they expect devotion in return. And if there's any crack in that devotion, it disturbs them. And a mother-in-law can crack that devotion of her daughter by pulling her. So that's why they don't tolerate as much the mother-in-law. He's faithful, or is he? The person can be unfaithful if he does not have Torah and Yirat Shamayim, obviously. But usually, Taurus as a sign, because he's devoted, he tends to be more faithful than others. He's honest and will not look to criticize you. As I said before, they are tolerant with faults of people. They're not so criticizing and negative about people's mistakes. And last but not least, all the Tauruses will love this one. No one treats his wife as well as he does. And that's very, very true. A lot of research went into this. Now, there might be some, let's see here. There might be some Leos who might be very, very nice. Some Libras that are very, very nice. But as far as treating their wife, if he loves his wife, if this man is a Taurus and he really loves his wife, he is the best one in treating his wife like a queen. Now, of course, this works the other way around too. The woman is a Taurus. She could be very, very devoted too. But the men, the Tauruses, the real men, the real Tauruses, they tend to treat their wives very, very well. They take good care of them. Okay, the women. This is another nice quality that the Taurus women want to hear about. What is that? Yeah, again, a lot of it applies to women too. But here I'm trying to fine-tune it between men and women. Not necessarily a relationship. Description of a woman who's married or single. You're about to date someone who's a Taurus woman. What should you be expecting? A lot of the sterling qualities that men are looking for are found in Taurus's women. Many of those sterling qualities, and I wrote here, in appearance, demeanor, and values. Now you will find that Aquarius, Pisces, there's certain other signs who may have a lot of these sterling qualities. They can be beautiful in appearance, sympathetic, hem and all that, demeanor and values too. But Taurus are known for the other reasons that I mentioned later, or possessing a lot of good qualities. They have a gentle and pleasant disposition, which is also something that not every sign has. There's some who are very nervous. So what if they have good values? They're nervous. You want a nervous person? Well, if you got one, that means Hashem says you can take care of that. You can handle it. But if you had a choice, you would prefer somebody gentle and pleasant. And they're straightforward. They don't beat around the bush. Has moral and emotional courage, more so than many men. May have a violent temper if provoked. If you don't want to have somebody that has a temper, you may want to avoid somebody that has this sign. Does that mean that every Taurus will have a violent temper? Not necessarily, but they may have a violent temper more so than others. Taurus has much more of a temper than Gemini, much more of a temper than Libra, much more of a temper than, let's see, who else? Than Pisces. Now, Scorpio has a terrible temper too, but it's a different kind of temper. Right? So, depending on if you're comfortable with this, it helps to be aware that if provoked, they can have a temper. They can show frigid indifference to those she dislikes. That's something that, of course, is a problem for those people who are looking for somebody who's more social, more friendly to their friends, that will be willing to have their friends over, to have a lot of guests. That's what you're looking for. A Taurus can host, but on her terms, who she wants. She just doesn't want to have anybody. And if you have them over, she can be a freezer. She can be indifferent. Does not like phonies, but will accept people the way they are. More stimulated by the practical, physical, and beautiful than the mental. This is a very important point. A lot of people are looking for mental stimulation. They want a woman who's mentally stimulated. Now, Tauruses can be intelligent. They can have a college degree and intellectual, but that's not their emphasis. In life, their emphasis is much more on the physical, the beautiful, the practical. They want security, They want warmth and affection. They want something solid that they can hold on to. Physical, they're more physical. And if you're more into the mental, more abstract, that doesn't speak to them too much. That's why this helps for one to recognize which signs they get along with better. Taurus does much better as a result with Pisces, Capricorn, and sometimes with Virgo too. These are the signs that tend to mesh a lot better because they understand each other well, they're in the same wavelength approximately. Even though there are other elements that are water or earth, they don't always blend well. They just, they can get along, but they don't blend well. Each one may not have what the other one needs in their relationship. Because in order for a marriage to work, a marriage is not just a friendship. People think that marriage is a friendship. Marriage is really you're giving the other what the other one is lacking. You're helping, you're complementing the other. A friendship, you don't live together. There's not that much demands of the relationship. Now, if you marry somebody who is also your best friend, then you're a lucky man, because that's not very common. But hopefully you will marry somebody that you need, and that she needs you, and that could be a successful relationship. But don't think that your wife or your husband will necessarily be your best friend, because there's different terms and different realities when it comes to this relationship and this relationship. So not everybody really feels good with just anybody. And in a marriage, when you're with each other for so many years, you really want to feel good. You want the relationship to be transparent. Adores children, but can be strict and demanding, especially when the children grow up. They can be very strict and demanding. Won't stand for disobedience and sloppiness in the home, as I mentioned earlier. And the following quality is very much known for Taurus. They will support their husband and take a job if necessary. Many times, a Taurus woman joins her husband and helps her husband in the job, in the business, will look for another job if the finances are not too good. They're very devoted, and they will not let their husbands down. And they're very dedicated, whatever it takes. They want the best furnishings, but will look out for bargains. Even though Taurus likes beautiful things, they will look out for bargains. There are certain signs in the zodiac that are very much into saving money and looking out for bargains. And Taurus is one. Expects complete devotion, otherwise she can become very resentful. Devotion is extremely important to a Taurus. If they notice anything which is short of devotion, it bothers them very, very much more than other signs who are saying, "Oh, forgiving. Okay, you're talking to another woman. Okay, that's fine. As long as you just say hi, goodbye. Nothing more than that." But a Taurus, even the hi, goodbye is too much. Why are you looking at her this way? Why did you stare at this one? They can be very possessive and very protective and very resentful if their husbands are looking at someone else more than at them. So that could be a problem with certain signs who like to look and compare. A Taurus is not a crybaby. There are certain signs, that, as we call them before, kvetchers and nags. Not Taurus. Taurus is not a crybaby, but expects her husband to be the main breadwinner. So if the husband does not have a good parnassah, it's going to be a problem. She will help him, but she will expect him to be the main one. And if he's lazy, doesn't want to work, or doesn't have a good job, we're talking about those who are dating, not those who are married already. So it will be a problem. She has the strength to infuse her husband with hope. This is a beautiful, very important quality. Not every sign has the ability to encourage the other one, to give them hope. Taurus is so strong and so confident. As long as they're not resentful and they're not unhappy, they have that ability to give a lot of edud, chizuk, encouragement to their husband, which is it's great in case the husband is down. And last but not least, they are dependable and predictable. You can predict exactly how a Taurus woman will react if you say certain things or do certain things. Certain signs you don't know. They are very dependable and predictable, and they are loyal during the ups and downs of life. That's also important. We all may have ups and downs, and they will stick with it. There are some signs that will just divorce and leave. not them. They will be with you till the end. And now we have a little bit of advice for Taurus children and advice for the Taurus boss. Taurus children, we spoke about their stubbornness. How do you deal with the stubborn Taurus? The best way is with hugs and kisses. That's the only thing that works. And the reason why that works is as follows. A Taurus will resist force. He will literally resist any force, but he will not resist affection. He cannot resist it. If you show him true affection, a hug and a kiss, he just can't resist. He will melt. So with the Taurus children, that's really one of the best strategies. I recommend using athletics to overcome their shyness. Some of them can be very shy, and since they're very good at athletics, get them into sports, and that perhaps will take away some of their shyness if they have any. Give them music lessons to help them with their moods, because if they hear music, it stimulates them. Everybody likes music. The music is beautiful to the neshama. It stimulates all of us. But Taurus, because he becomes gloomy sometimes, and he has his moods, if he becomes a musician, if he knows how to play an instrument, it can help him a lot. And if they don't, then at least let them hear some good music. A lot of them, therefore, should be given music lessons if they have the talent for it. Advice for Taurus boss. He will be patient with your mistakes, and he will not regularly yell at you. Some signs will always yell. And Aries will yell every 15 minutes or so. You can expect it. Maybe not at you, but somebody else. You will be hearing him every day in the office. You will be hearing him yelling at someone. It's almost impossible that a day should go by without him raising his voice at least a couple times. Not a Taurus. Don't take advantage of his being considerate, unless of course he's Egyptian. or Moroccan. Yeah. Don't take advantage of his being considerate. Sooner or later he will fire you. Because even though he's considerate, if after a while you took advantage of his considerations and his patience, he will surprise you. You are fired, and he will yell at you. No warning. No warning. He didn't even give you a warning. You took advantage of his consideration. You didn't understand that he was just being patient with you. You will be fired. So be careful not to take advantage. Watch out. He may be testing your integrity. The Taurus pays attention to everything, and he sometimes tests his workers. Will prefer the old safe way over new ideas. You come up with a brand new idea. He says, you know what, I prefer the old safe way. This I know works for me. I don't want to try something new. Is that good or bad? It depends. It may not be so good if he's not willing to try a new idea that may make him some more money. But he usually is right by going the safe way anyway. He has a very good business acumen. He can sense if something good is coming or not. Otherwise, of course, why shouldn't they try? But they prefer what is safe and what is known to them over something that is new. So don't try to sell him something that he doesn't want. He wants things done his way. He's stubborn. He won't judge hastily, and he won't expect miracles overnight. There are some signs that expect this. Quick. You can change everything. A miracle. No. He's more practical. They're down to earth. So they understand that you can't perform a miracle overnight. So that's good. You're working with somebody who's realistic and he's practical. He's not dreaming. There are some signs that are in the dreaming world. And he will stick to whatever he starts. Just real quickly, bring up the midot. I just put a table of midot of certain characteristics. We're going to go real quickly through them. Gava, arrogance, I don't think Taurus has a problem with it. Anava, humbleness, I think he has a little bit of it, but maybe he needs to work a little bit on his humbleness, but he does not have arrogance. Busha, he can be shy, so he doesn't have that problem. Azut, he's not that aggressive, doesn't have that much chutzpah, so that's not his weakness. Ahabav, I think they're very good. They're very devoted, they're very affectionate. Sin'ah, they can work on, because they tend to be sometimes very indifferent, very frigid, and they may dislike someone. Rahamim, they can be compassionate, so they don't have that weakness. Akhzariyut, they're usually not cruel. How about Simcha? Would you consider him somebody that is very happy, or does he have to work on his happiness? He may need to work. Based on our description that we saw of Taurus, happiness may be a midah that he may need to work on. Da'agais, does he get worried? Not so much. Harata, does he regret? Does he forgive? Not easily. He may have to work on being more forgiving. Ka'as, anger, only once in a blue moon. Ratzon, if people try to appease him, he has to work on that. He can't appease him so easily. Kinah, they usually don't tend to be jealous. Zrizut, he could work on. Zrizut means diligence. Sometimes they're lazy. Zeirut, he's a cautious person. He doesn't have to worry about being cautious. Aslut, laziness, he could work on. Nedivut, generosity, he's pretty generous. Saikanut, stinginess, not that much, but maybe a little bit. Zechira, remembering, he's pretty good at remembering birthdays and anniversaries, right? So he can remember good things, including a debt. If he owes somebody money, he's going to pay it back. And the sooner the better. If he has the money, he'll give it back in the following day. He doesn't want to be in debt. There are certain signs that forget their debts. You don't want to lend them money. They simply forget. Why should you have to remind them? Just don't lend them. Why have to deal with it? A Taurus, if you lend money, you can be assured, unless he's not a good person, that you're going to get every penny back. Atzlut, we spoke about that already. Shekha, they don't forget as much, and that could be a problem if it's forgetting a fault. Shetika, they're pretty good at keeping quiet. They don't talk a lot. Sheker, they're not into lying. They're more honest than other signs. Emet, they're truthful, and you can depend on them. Hanifu, they don't flatter. They'll tell you what they think of you. They'll tell you the truth. Lashon hara, they're not into gossiping. Teshuvah, they may have a hard time doing teshuvah because they're obstinate, they're stubborn. They may not admit, so they may have to work on this. Torah, they have the patience so they can become persistent and constant in learning Torah. Yirat Shamayim, they're God-fearing, perhaps, depending, they may have the problem with Yirat Shamayim because they're stubborn. Sablanut, patience, they have a lot of. Ta'ava,